Whatever may be its fate, the end of Game of Thrones is an event to be marked in television history. It has had some of the best and most subversive storytelling in its time, and to celebrate it, a number of us video essayists have decided to take a single episode from the story to examine what made it great. This is the Best of Thrones, The Red Wedding, where we'll be discussing how to effectively subvert expectations in your story. Today's video is brought to you by me and my book on writing and world building, compiling all of my writing and world building content into a single, easy to reference, easy to read book with discussions on how to write a first chapter to how to world build an empire for your novel. And on top of this, one new patron who joins each month will win a free copy of it, so congratulations to Taylor Vogel for last month. The link to get the book and my Patreon are down below. How do you effectively subvert expectations in your story? This line has been thrown around a bit in the last few weeks, so I wanted to talk about it. When a writer subverts expectations, the outcome of the story will not line up with what the reader would conventionally expect to happen. But nonetheless, there are still two things needed to make this subversion satisfying. The outcome of the story needs to line up with some other internal logic within the narrative. This means that though the outcome might be unexpected, it may still be a satisfying conclusion to a character arc, or incredibly thematically resonant, or very logically fit with the character's motivations. And there needs to be a strong sense of cause to effect. There are 13 story beats in Robb's thread of The Reigns of Castamere, the episode we're talking about, and each of these build towards these two crucial things required for a satisfying subversion. We'll talk about how, and then we'll use the subversive framework of a Shakespearean tragedy to explore the Red Wedding more deeply. Now, Robb's story ending in the Red Wedding was a masterful stroke of subversive writing, but a subversion of what, exactly? Martin discussed the genre trope he had in mind in an interview. After Ned's death, the next predictable thing is to think that the elder son is going to rise up and avenge his father, and everybody is going to expect that. The avenging one's father trope can be seen in C.S. Lewis's Prince Caspian with King Miraz, Richard and Terry Brooks' The Sword of Truth, Avatar: The Last Airbender in the case of Katara's mother. These are cornerstone pieces of the fantasy genre, but it dates back to Arthurian legend when Arthur's father killed Morgana's father in Shakespeare's masterpiece tragedy, Hamlet. And in subverting this, the first thing the story does is set up this genre convention that we expect by having Robb's father unjustly executed by a tyrant and Robb anointed King in the North.
The King in the North!
Though Joffrey is posed as the face of this execution, the true threat to Robb is Tywin. This gives Robb a righteous quest with personal stakes and a formidable opponent. And The Reigns of Castamere brings this conflict to its highest point. We have seen this simple narrative set up a dozen times before, but let's take a closer look at the episode itself. The first beat has Robb reconcile with his mother, Catelyn, after they had a falling out when she released Jaime Lannister, and they discuss the battle plan at hand.
If we take Tywin's castle from him, the Lords of Westeros will realize he's not invincible. Take his home, take his gold, take his power.
Catelyn rightly points out that this plan is dangerous.
If reinforcements arrive from King's Landing, before we take the castle, we'll be caught between Tywin's army and the sea.
Recognizing this, Robb notes that if he fails, it's all over. They'll be executed just like Ned as traitors. The scene follows the conventional story. The stakes are raised, and Tywin, the intelligent and war-worthy antagonist, is posed as the greatest threat to our heroes, who will surely be overcome, bringing justice for his father. Our expectations of the genre trope are maintained in the opening scene. And though everything points to Tywin as the main foe, Catelyn asks if they have enough men, to which Robb replies,
"If Walder Frey cooperates."
So both characters do recognize that the phrase will be difficult, but neither Catelyn nor Robb see them as a real threat to their overall plans. It's a purposeful misdirect that seeds the problem of Walder Frey in the shadow of Tywin Lannister, the conventional threat. Their focus on Tywin plays into our expectations of heroes and villains meeting in a final duel, of battle in the open field deciding the outcome of a war. Of course, if a viewer has been paying careful attention, or even any attention, they would know that the internal logic of the story could not be further from the truth. Secrets are worth more than silver or sapphires.
I've won every battle, but I'm losing this war.
You don't need to make formal alliances with people you trust.
The secrets, the scheming, the politics, the marriages have always been more important than the battles. In the second and third beats, Robb apologizes to the spurned Frey girls and Walder Frey pervs at Talisa. Now, in the book, this is actually a character named Jane Westerling, but we're working within the show here. This scene is intended to narrow in on Robb Stark's flaws as a character. Robb has no mind for politics. His honor and desire for love are weaknesses for a king in this episode. Robb making his apology is him attempting to remedy his wrongs, to confront the flaws that his father died for, and to confront the flaws in his own character. But like a tragic Shakespearean hero, this is too late. Bringing Robb's character flaws into the forefront so early in the episode reinforces the importance of consequences to his actions. We know that whatever plays out from this point on is the result of Robb's betrayal of his oath. All of this feeds into that first requirement. The subversion works because it follows logically from Robb's flaws and decisions, and it is consistent with Walder Frey's exploitative, jealous, and spiteful characterization, which we have seen before and is highlighted in this episode when he speaks to Talisa.
I say he betrayed me for firm tits and a tight fit.
Walder knows that he can get away with mocking his king here, mocking his queen, and he takes advantage of that out of spite and lust. The subversion still carries a strong sense of cause and effect, that first requirement. The audience merely underestimates the consequences, largely because they still expect this genre convention to play out before them. But all of this is also meant to remind us of the other internal logic that governs the Game of Thrones. This third beat also carries with it an instance of uneasy foreshadowing.
The wine will flow red, and the music will play loud, and we'll put this mess behind us.
Red wine and louder music. Though this line seems innocuous at first, its phrasing is very particular. First, Roose Bolton refusing wine, and second, the loud music of the Rains of Castamere are what make Catelyn uneasy and suspicious, moments before realizing that they are betrayed and the massacre begins. In the books, there are also visions from Theon and Dany that pretty clearly foreshadow this as well. Robb's story then moves on to the wedding of Edmure Tully and Rosalind Frey, and the ease of resolution to this tension of the Freys yet again reinforces our expectations for the story to play out, in line with the avenging son genre trope. However, in an interesting detail, while all of the named characters are looking forward towards the altar, Catelyn exchanging a nervous glance with Edmure Tully, we can clearly see Roose Bolton's gaze is fixed on Robb Stark from behind, even before he looks back at him, an unsettling hint of his role later in the episode.
The Lannisters send their regards.
The sixth beat of the story begins when Roose refuses wine. Catelyn asks why he doesn't drink, to which he responds,
Don't you drink, Lord Bolton?
Never do, my lady. Dulls the senses.
And to be clear, this characteristic is highlighted for a reason. Scriptwriters don't just include this stuff for nothing. It suggests a readiness for something, to never be caught off guard, almost like he wants to be the smartest man in the room. Catelyn is clearly uneasy talking to him, and she has been suspicious of him in the past. All of this is just meant to highlight the suspicious role that he plays in the story, feeling into that feeling of unease before the subversion. But these beats are put into the story and framed in this particular way because subverting expectations doesn't just require you to foreshadow that they would be subverted. It also requires you to reinforce the genre trope at the same time, because otherwise, readers will realize that the story is not pointing towards their expectation. You want to lead them down the garden path of the genre trope. The show writers most clearly did this in the 8th beat between Talisa and Robb, where Talisa reveals that she is pregnant.
It seems to me the father should have some say in his son's naming.
Eddard, don't you want to teach little Ned Stark how to ride horses?
I do.
This is actually a change from the books, but it works well in the show to help subvert our expectations. It plays into the trope of a redemptive love between Robb and Talisa. Like how Ned is dead, his honor and character live on in Robb, there is now a poetic rebirth of Ned in their child. But at the same time, we are reminded of Robb's flaws when he tries to kiss Talisa, when it's clearly inappropriate.
No, don't. Don't insult them.
He underestimates and doesn't have the mind for court politics, just like his father. The result of simultaneously reinforcing this genre trope and reminding the audience of the subversive internal logic of Game of Thrones creates this unease that is difficult to pin down, but seems to be felt by Catelyn Stark. The ninth beat of the story is when Catelyn begins to suspect that something is truly amiss. The music ramps up louder, playing the Rains of Castamere. A song of Tywin's famous slaughter from once before. Catelyn's story in the episode recalls Walder Frey's line at the beginning, that the wine would flow red, that the music would play loudly before things would be put behind them. The 10th beat then sees Walder give a speech, and Catelyn comes to realize that they have been betrayed. She warns Robb, but it's too late. The Red Wedding begins, and Talisa is killed, stabbed in the womb. There would be no poetic rebirth for Ned Stark. Robb, our avenging and righteous hero, is killed where he stands, and Catelyn Stark watches her son die before her before being murdered herself, and no army stands to avenge their fallen king when they too are slaughtered. The Red Wedding is a logical and clear consequence of the actions of our characters, both across the story broadly and within the episode itself. It isn't shocking in a bad way in terms of plot, because there is a clear sense of cause and effect. It was Robb's decision to betray his oath to Walder Frey. It was his choice to marry a woman that brought them no allies, which meant they needed the armies of the Freys and others. It was his choice to break an oath to a man known for being treacherous, greedy, spiteful, and opportunistic. It was Robb's character flaws and Walder Frey's known character traits that naturally gave rise to the Red Wedding. But more importantly, the subversion was effective because the story both reinforced our expectations about how it was going to pan out, without contradicting the internal logic of Martin's story. What happens very much fits in with and reflects the character arcs, the character motivations, the themes that we know. Martin very much plays into the genre trope of the poetic rebirth of Ned in Robb and the righteous hero to gain justice on the battlefield, but the story had already well established that the moral hero on a righteous quest is undone by the Machiavellian politics and political realism of his medieval world. In Ned's story, the Red Wedding almost feels inevitable in retrospect, and this is because the best twists are not the ones that we didn't see coming, but the ones we should have seen coming. What matters is just that you lay the clues and foundations for that subversion to happen, and the clues were laid. They were laid in Robb's decisions and the themes and internal logic previously established in the story. This is why subversion doesn't necessarily work if it doesn't fit in with the character arcs and motivations and themes we've been presented with in the past. Roose Bolton's final moment,
The Lannisters send their regards.
is entirely consistent with his established character, made more immediate by the tonal unease of his moments in this episode. Their character arcs played out in a way that logically follows, and being the protagonist does not spare you the horrors of your own story. The consequence of the plot is wholly in line with the themes and arcs established previously in the narrative. It just followed a different logic that we were kind of ignoring. Of the 13 beats in Robb's story this episode, beats 1, 4, and 8 all reinforce our expectations of the avenging son genre trope by emphasizing Tywin's threat over Walder and giving us the poetic rebirth of Ned Stark, while story beats 2, 3, 6, and 9 prepare us for the subversion in having a strong sense of cause and effect by reminding us of Robb's fatal flaws, Walder Frey's character, and the internal logic of Game of Thrones, the two elements needed to make this subversion satisfying. And to more deeply explain why Martin's subversive writing is so satisfying, we should compare it to the framework of a Shakespearean tragedy, the likes of which we do know Martin was influenced by, where he works against the traditional hero narrative by subverting our expectation that overcoming character flaws brings with it a just resolution to the story. The tragic hero is someone of great stature. Hamlet was a prince of Denmark, Othello a general in the Venetian army, and Robb a boy made high king, king in the north, inspiring fear and love in his men and enemies alike. And like Hamlet and Macbeth, this greatness is juxtaposed with a great fall from grace and a horrific end, to which we know that Robb Stark is destined. But a Shakespearean tragedy is less defined by its tragic end, and more how this end comes about. The first part of this is a tragic flaw that the hero may fight against at first, but they indulge in, that brings about their own demise. Hamlet's indecisiveness and need for moral consistency end in his own destruction when he does not choose to end the conflict early. Macbeth's lust for power leads him to paranoia and tyranny, losing those valiant and just qualities that he has at the beginning of the play. Robb's flaw is choosing love over duty and marrying Talisa, choosing an absolute idea of justice and executing the head of the Stark family, losing him thousands of men, underestimating the importance of politics in his war, all of which logically culminate in the Red Wedding. The second part of the Shakespearean framework is that he does not let the heroes simply die as they are, flawed but human. The tragedy is compounded by the heroes realizing the error of their ways too late. The Shakespearean tragedy inevitably ends in what is known as anagnoresis, the moment in which the tragic hero finally understands the full scope of what has been happening around them, behind the scenes and otherwise. It is a horrific realization that this unexpected and sudden fall is caused by their fatal flaw that they indulged too deeply in. Robb has this when Talisa and his child are murdered in front of him, like Othello collapsing after murdering his own love, or King Lear confronting his faults with how he treated his daughter Cordelia. And though Robb comes to see his flaw, choosing to trust his mother who knows the game better and attempting to mend relations with Walder Frey, that a king must put their duty first, it is too late. The seeds of fate are sown, the ink is dry. In Tom McAllenden's What is a Shakespearean Tragedy, he writes, "There's a very important sense in which circumstances conspire to produce a situation in which disaster seems inevitable. Hamlet is trapped in a situation where to do nothing is to encourage the spread of evil, and to act is to become part of it. Oh, cursed despite that ever I was born to set it right." Like with Hamlet, Robb's change is too late and too hollow. The consequences of his actions play out with a distinct feeling of inevitability, that his change in character does not undo the past. Robb's story also follows the Shakespearean pattern of alienation of one's allies. He loses the Starks, the Freys, and isolates himself from his mother at one point. The Red Wedding in this way is deeply Shakespearean, and I feel it best reflects what Martin called a guiding principle in his writing from William Faulkner. The human heart in conflict with itself is the only thing worth writing about. The rest is just set dressing. Following the paths of Lear, Othello, Hamlet, and Macbeth, Robb's story is that of a Shakespearean tragic hero. The scene of anagnoresis is made poignant by its deep sense of waste. It is subversive because we finally see that though the hero confronts or even overcomes their flaws, it does not undo the past which returns to haunt them. It does not bring about a just resolution to the story. Overcoming one's flaws does not mean you succeed. We expected much to come of a great man, even in his death, but both his death and his life are wasted for nothing. There is no justice for Robb. Though Hamlet and Robb may better themselves, they have not truly bettered the world they created, subverting the traditional third act of the hero's journey. But that is all from me. I will leave a link down below to the other videos in this series, The Best of Thrones, and feel free to make your own, talk about your own favourite scene, and tell me why it's fantastic. Feel free to come support me on Patreon. There's a chance to win a free copy of On Writing and World Building. Otherwise, you can go and get it down at the link below. It comes out May 30. That's the paperback version. Those are just pre-order copies of the digital version. And if you're feeling kind, come support me on Patreon. Thank you very much. Supreme Leader Mishka appreciates your support. Thanks guys for working on this with me. This has been a fantastic little fun thing to do. I'm not like doing Game of Thrones content, and I'm not like doing Marvel content. It's just that all of these things sort of came together at the same time, and I was asked to participate in some of these collaborations, which I always want to do, want to talk with other YouTubers, and you know, so all of it happened at the same time. I'll be doing some more Avatar stuff and writing stuff and world building stuff in the coming weeks. Just got a couple more videos out of the way, and we'll go that way. Yeah, you guys are awesome. What are your thoughts? Let me know down below. Stay nerdy, and I will see you in the future.